In the first 9 chapters of Genesis, we see 3 kinds of government: the divine government, the government of the conscience or self-government, and human government. All Bible students agree that these governments constitute 3 of God's dispensations, 3 of the ways in which God deals with the human race. The first dispensation was that of God's divine government, and the second was that of the government of man's own conscience. When man fell from the rule of his conscience, he came under the third dispensation, that of the human government. I would like to say a word to the young people. We thank God that we are His creatures. As human beings, we are under Him and He is the real government above us. We also have a conscience that He has provided for us. This is a good thing. Moreover, we have many deputy authorities: the parents at home, the principals and teachers in the schools, and the government. All of these are the deputy authorities of God. By these 3 kinds of government, the human race has been preserved. Although mankind has not been saved, it has been preserved by these 3 kinds of government. Humanly speaking, we all must have a fear of God. We all must listen to our conscience, and we all must respect God's deputy authority. We must respect our parents, the school administrators, and the government. God uses all the deputy authorities to maintain the human race so that He might fulfill His purpose. Never rebel against God, against the human conscience, or against human government. God's salvation moves in a direction opposite to that of man's fall. Man fell firstly from God's presence to man's conscience. Secondly, from man's conscience to human government, and eventually from human government to rebellion under Satan's instigation. In God's salvation, we are firstly saved from rebellion to human government, and from human government to the conscience. Eventually, we are saved from conscience to God's presence in our spirit. Man's fall from human government to Satan's instigation. The fall from self-government to human government, however, was not the final fall. Man fell even further than this, falling from human government to Satan's instigation. Human government was of God's authorization, but Satan utilized the authority which God gave man to form nations and to instigate a rebellion against God with the nations. Hence, man fell into an open rebellion against God. What is rebellion? Rebellion is the denial of right and authority. At the rebellion at Babel, man declared that he denied God's right and that he was absolutely free from God's authority. We see this in the world today. Some people say, "Who is God? What is God?" They cast off the feeling of their conscience and deny God's right and authority over them. This is exactly what happened at Babel. In that rebellion, the human race cast away God's right and authority over man. Although there is a tendency along this line today, a part of the human race still is not for this. This is the reason that God is able to allow the human race to remain on earth. If the human race suddenly all became like man at Babel, God would have to say, "This is the time when I must come down to intervene." We have already seen that at the fall at Babel, God personally intervened and judged that rebellion directly. The fourth fall at Babel was more than a fall. It was a rebellion. That rebellion was a satanic instigation. The fourth fall was not a matter of immorality, murder, or violence. If you read the record concerning man's fourth fall in Genesis 11, you'll find that it says nothing about immorality and violence being involved there. The fourth fall at Babel was more than a fall, it was a rebellion. That rebellion was a satanic instigation. The fourth fall was not a matter of immorality, murder, or violence. If you read the record concerning man's fourth fall in Genesis 11, you will find that it says nothing about immorality and violence being involved there. When I read this portion of the Bible as a young man, I did not think that it was so bad. I said to myself, what was wrong for people to build a city and a high tower? It seems wonderful to me. Why did God have to come down to judge? There was no theft, murder, or immorality. At that time, I did not see what was behind that rebellion. At the back of that rebellion was the satanic instigation. Thus, man's fourth fall must be called a rebellion. The question in that fall was not morality or immorality. It was a question as to who would have the right and the authority in the universe. Do the right and the authority belong to God or to man? They belong to God. He is the creator, the owner of all. All right and authority must be his. At Babel, the creatures of God rebelled against him, saying that they did not care for him. They claimed that they were the owners, that authority was theirs, and that they would do whatever they wanted to do. Thus, that was not merely a fall, but a rebellion instigated by the rebellious Satan. Firstly, man was under God. Secondly, man was under man's conscience. And thirdly, man was under human government. Where was man at the time of Babel? He was under Satan's instigation. At that time, man was altogether under Satan. Man collaborated with Satan. This brings us to the second factor of the cause of the fourth fall, the rebellion of the human race. The second factor of the cause of the fourth fall was the rebellion of the human race. The whole human race rebelled collectively against God's right and authority. As we have seen, the issue was a matter of who would have the right in this universe, of who would have authority on earth. The entire human race was stirred up, having been instigated into rebellion, to declare that they did not care for God's right or for God's authority.